Hey, welcome back. So, what I decided to do, being that a majority of the people who put comments in the video, they chose book one or two. So, what I'm going to read is chapter one of each book. So, I'm going to start off with Asylum Lake, and I'm reading chapter one, and then I'll read chapter one of Awakened Princess, I think it was. Okay, y'all ready? Here we go. So, oh wait, before I start, there was a comment in my on my last book that I read, and it said to get a better mic or something like that because the volume was down. So if you see me holding this little thing, this is a headphone mic. So I'm testing to see if it sounds better. That's the best I can do because I have to research mics, that you pin to your shirt and talk on. So until I can get a chance to do that, I'm going to try this out, and y'all tell me how it sounds. Okay. This book has 34 chapters. Okay, chapter 1. Looking Back to Look Ahead. April 10th, 1972, Bedlam Falls, Michigan. 6 days squirreled away inside the small room behind the clerk's office had angered, divided, and eventually broken the juror's spirit to the point of surrender. The exhausted procession of wrinkled suits and downcast eyes shuffled to the jury box as hushed whispers swept across the anxious gallery. 3 sharp raps of the gavel brought the courtroom to near silence. The Honorable Orrin J. Hutley stilly glowy finished the job. He was a sour old man with prune lips and deep lines that crisscrossed his face. With his thin neck jutting out from the top of his black robe and talon-like fingers grasping the gavel, he surveyed the courtroom like a vulture perched menacingly over dying prey. Leaning forward from his roost, he placed his elbows upon the bench and pierced the jury box with his unblinking stare. Mr. Foreman, has the jury reached its verdict? Sonny Dyerich, jury foreman and Bedlam's only insurance salesman, slowly rose to his feet. Yes, Your Honor, we have. Huntley shifted his attention from Dietrich to fix his eyes on the stoic boy seated at the defense table. His words scraped like sandpaper from his dry mouth. Will the defendant please rise? Dressed in a crisp white shirt that buttoned tightly at the neck and sharp gray trousers, the youth rose alongside his attorney. Awaiting the verdict with the unfailing faith of a supportive father, the Reverend James Collins stood directly behind his wisp of a son. Delicate features defined the lad's fair-skinned face, while hair the color of autumn leaves spilled down over his forehead. But beneath the maze of curls, brown, lifeless eyes stared as cold as 2 pennies rusted in a late November rain. The boy's eyes could chill blood. Shaken, Huntley tore his eyes from the defendant, recasting his focus towards the jury box. Mr. Foreman, as the count 1 of the indictment, the murder of Joanne Reed, how does the jury find? Your Honor, he hesitated. We find the defendant guilty. The words passed through the Dietrich's trembling lips with cowardly hesitation. Both joyful tears and heartfelt wrenches sobs erupted from the gallery. Huntley lurched to his feet and banged the gavel on the bench. Order! I will have order, he cried, or I will clear this court. The commotion subsided to a degree. Soft murmurs hung in the air. Huntley collapsed back into his chair as the hum of cameras and recording devices reverberated throughout the courtroom. An army of reporters from across the state had invaded the small town weeks before, asking questions and digging for answers. But answers had been elusive, and each detail that had emerged throughout the trial had only posed more questions. The reporters, for now, had the answers that mattered most to them and were salivating at the prospect of sharing it. In a matter of moments, young Leon Collins, the same boy who had shoveled driveways and mowed lawns, and with whom Sunday sermons and meals with most everyone had been shared, had been found guilty on all 5 charges. Murder, He had been convicted of brutal crimes committed not only against his neighbors and community, but against humanity itself. He was led by deputies from the courtroom, the chains that were clapped tightly about his wrists and ankles jingled with each unbalanced step. He peered over his shoulder into the gallery. A sly smile curved his thin lips. In the wake of people rushing from the courtroom, a nondescript man rose from a hard wooden seat in the back of the gallery. His presence during the trial had gone unnoticed, as it had been at the funerals months before. Not that anyone should notice. More than a decade had elapsed since he had last walked the streets of Bethlehem's Fall. The man was pale with a tuft of dark hair atop his head and rail thin. His natty black suit hung from his bones, eerily similar to the way clothes hang on a scarecrow. His sunken and red-rimmed eyes, appearing to have stared into the bottom of one too many whiskey bottles, darted around the empty room as he made his way forward to the oak table where Lionel returned each day to sit with his attorney. Resting on a desk-polished surface lay a bracelet. The man's whiskey-soaked eyes widened as a look of recognition, then horror, crept over his face. With a callous hand, he scraped it from the table. Much as a painful sliver slowly works its way from one flesh, this sinister token had somehow surfaced from the murky depths of Asylum Lake. Alone in his knowledge of how it had come to rest on the rocky lake bed, the man looked down at the words stamped on its battered surface and winced as he traced a trembling finger across the cold plastic. He stood there, trance-like. Suddenly, his gnarled fingers closed around the bracelet, quickly hiding it away inside his breast pocket. As the stranger walked from the empty courthouse into the damp air, a chilling wave racked his entire body. He paused on the steps, steadying himself against the handrail. The spring breeze, which usually held the promise of brighter days to come, today carried an ominous scent. With more than a passing suspicion that Lionel's verdict and the evidence introduced throughout the trial had been an omen of a long-forgotten darkness looming on the horizon, the man in black shambled from the courthouse. Breathing slow and deep, he placed a protective hand over his heart and headed south into the afternoon chill, the Lord's Prayer falling from his lips. Okay, that is chapter 1 of Asylum's Lake. Let me know what y'all think. Should I read this one? Continue to read this one? Stay tuned for book number 2, the suggestion for book number 2.